Hola clase, bienvenidos. Espero que tú estés listo para aprender más. Vamos a estar aprendiendo acerca de los verbos irregulares en el subjuntivo. We've already learned how to form regular verbs in the subjunctive, so now we're going to learn how to form irregular verbs in the present subjunctive. The nice thing is that we're only going to look at 5 irregular verbs in the subjunctive. So once you see the pattern, it will be really easy to remember these irregulars. So the 5 irregulars that we're going to look at this year are ser, ir, saber, estar, and dar. And you'll notice that I've broken them down. I've got the ER and IR verbs on the left-hand side, and I have the AR verbs on the right-hand side. So you're going to notice some patterns with these verbs as we move on. If you'll remember, ser is to be, ir is to go, saber is to know, estar is also to be, and dar is to give. All right, so I want to show you why these 5 verbs are irregular. So if you go back to when we were conjugating regular verbs in the present subjunctive, you'll remember that we did 3 steps. We went to the yo form of the present tense, we dropped the yo, and then we added the opposite ending. So the thing with these 5 irregular verbs is that if you try to follow those 3 steps, you're going to find that you have a problem. You're going to get stuck on steps 1 and 2. So any of these 5 verbs, if you try to go to the yo form, like ser, for example, is soy in the yo form, yo soy, you're going to see that you can't drop the o because there's no o on the end to drop. The same with ir becomes voy in the present tense in the yo form. Saber is say, estar is estoy, and dar is doy. So if you follow the first 2 steps, go to the present tense, and then try to drop the o, you'll see that you can't drop the o. And so that is why these 5 verbs are classified as irregulars. Okay, so here's what these 5 irregular verbs look like when they're conjugated in all 5 forms. You will notice that the yo form and the ella, usted form, they get conjugated into the same form. So for the first verb, ser, sea, seas, sea, seamos, and sean, you'll see that sea is used twice. So you'll have to use the context of the sentence to know who your subject is. Another thing to note there at the end, there are some accent marks that get added to the verb estar and dar. That's just to keep the verb estar and dar from getting confused with other words that look the same. So for example, de, de, if you don't put the accent mark over the e, it would look like the preposition of, which is also spelled de. So that accent mark just helps you know that we're talking about the verb. And that's why that's important. The next thing that I want to show you is that these 5 irregulars can actually be really easy if you look at the endings. So you can try to memorize all 5 verbs in all 5 forms. That means you're going to have to memorize 25 words, or you can look for the patterns, and that will save you a lot of time. So we've already looked at the fact that these verbs do not follow the first and second steps, but they do follow the third step. So even though we can't put them in the yo form and drop the o, we can do the third step, which is adding the opposite ending. So I've got my er and ir verbs on the left here, ser, ir, and saber. And you'll notice that they're all going to take the opposite ending, as, amos, an. And then on the right, I have the AR verbs, estar and dar, and they're going to take the endings es, amos, en. So if you look at these endings on the next slide, you'll see that there's a pattern. Here's the 5 irregulars again. and I simply color-coded the ER and IR verbs. They have those green endings, and you'll notice that all the endings are exactly the same. And then the AR verbs, estar and dar, they have those blue endings, and their endings are exactly the same. So there's actually nothing irregular about the endings of any of these 5 verbs. The endings follow the rules of the regular verbs in the present subjunctive. The only reason why these verbs are irregular in the subjunctive is because their stems are irregular. So we get to them in an irregular way. Okay, so to wrap up here, I want to show you how to use these 5 irregular verbs in the subjunctive. So far, we've learned 2 different ways to use the subjunctive. We've learned about using the subjunctive with impersonal expressions, and then we've also learned how to use the subjunctive with wants and wishes. So you'll see that all of these examples here are just examples of either using the subjunctive with wants and wishes or with impersonal expressions. And in each example, the first verb is in the present tense, and then the second verb is in the subjunctive. And the reason why we use the subjunctive in all of these sentences here is because something about that second verb that's highlighted in green is uncertain. So we're either uncertain about whether or not the people that we want to do these things, we're uncertain about whether they will do them or not, or we might just be uncertain if everybody feels the same way about these things as we do. So the first example, su yapa espera que sus hijos sean responsables. Su yapa hopes that her children are responsible. And we use the subjunctive there for the verb ser, sean, because we're not really sure if her children will be responsible. The only thing we know is that she wants them to be responsible. The next sentence, es bueno que tú vayas a la biblioteca. It's good that you go to the library. So we use the subjunctive here for the verb ir, because while, I might make this statement, I think that it's good that you go to the library, you might not think that it's good to go to the library, or your older sibling who has to drive you to the library might not think that it's good. So we're kind of uncertain of whether it really is actually a good thing or not. Number 3, es importante que ellos sepan los detalles. It's important that they know the details. And again, this is just relative to whoever's opinion is being stated. We could say, es malo que ellos sepan los detalles. So it's bad that they know the details. Number 4, yo espero que Darlene no esté enferma. I hope that Darlene is not sick. So again, we use the subjunctive for that second verb because I don't have any control over whether Darlene is sick or not. I hope that she's not sick, but I don't have any control over that outcome. The last one, tú quieres que yo les dé regalos a los niños. You want me to give gifts to the children. And again, this is a pretty obvious one of why the subjunctive is used for the verb dar. We conjugate it to de because you want me to buy gifts for the children, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I am going to. So you've got to use the subjunctive. And that's all I have for you guys today. One quick reminder with this lesson is to be very careful with your subject. So notice that in some of these sentences, there's 2 subjects in each sentence. So number 1, if you read that, you see that there's 2 subjects. You have suyapa at the beginning of the sentence, and you have hijos at the second part of the sentence. So you need to be really careful to make sure that the first verb, esperar, is conjugated to match suyapa, but that second verb, ser, it needs to match hijos. So that's why it's conjugated as sean, not sea. So be very careful with that, because if you just look at the first subject you see, and then try to conjugate the second verb, in the same way, like to match that first subject, you're going to get it wrong every time. So be watching to see if there is a second subject. Now, in number 2, there really is no subject in the first part. Es bueno que is just an impersonal expression, so really nobody is mentioned there. It's just saying it's good that. The second part of the sentence there, though, does have a subject. In this example, it's tú, which is you. That's why you conjugate the verb ir to vayas. So just be watching for your subjects really carefully and make sure that you're conjugating the verbs to match the correct subject.